take over.
Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a very great occasion for Avatar to have given us this opportunity to talk about a national SWAP program. It may sound very ambitious and aspirational at this point of time because we haven't started a regional or a city SWAP program as yet in our country. Kidney transplantation is no doubt the best treatment for end-stage kidney disease. And we require at least about 200,000 kidney transplants every year. And we do probably about 10,000 transplants. So obviously there is a huge need for growth of transplantation, kidney transplantation in our country. Obviously, one of the single most important factors for not being able to do these transplants is the availability of the donors. The disease donor program is not grown so much in our country. It's growing, but mostly in the southern and the western part of the country. But many areas of the country do not have a successful or a very good disease donor program. Therefore, living donor transplantation continues to be the most prominent kidney transplantation program in our country. And therefore, we would need a very successful SWAP program in our country to increase the donor pool. And increasing, now that many patients are also living on dialysis for long periods of time, many patients do get sensitized with blood transfusions and infections and others, and therefore many of these people are not able to get transplanted because of these antibodies. And therefore, including these patients also, the SWAP program would help us increase the domain of the availability of donors. I have a very, very good panel with me, and it includes Dr. Harbir Kohli, who is Professor of Nephrology at PGI MER Chandigarh, Dr. Vishwanath Billa, who is the nephrologist, very prominent nephrologist, and has been running an Apex foundation, which does the SWAP program, and they did a successful program at some point of time, and I would want his experience about it. Urmila Anand is a prominent nephrologist from Hyderabad, and she is going to talk also about the challenges and solutions about the paired kidney donation. And then we have Vivek. I told you Vivek is the nephrologist from Ahmedabad, and he is been the most successful out of all of us having done a paired kidney donation. And then we have Dr. Sandeep Guleria is a surgeon. I don't see him here as yet, whether he joined, but he is a prominent surgeon of Delhi, and he was at All India Institute of Medical Sciences, and now he's at Apollo Hospital. And we'll ask him about his views about the paired kidney donation. And then we have two prominent people who have been involved in paired kidney donation for a long period of time. And it's a pleasure to welcome them. Michael Rees, who is the professor of urology at University of Toledo Medical Center, and he has been a founder of the Paired Kidney Donation Alliance. And it's a pleasure to welcome him, and also Atul Agnihotri, who is also the Chief Growth Officer of the Paired Kidney Alliance, and he's also working at Dubai and Middle East, and is in sort of advancing the paired kidney donation in these countries. And I'm sure he will be, we would like to hear him out about his establishing these programs in the Middle East. Dr. Kohli, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Kher. Well, so I'd like to share with you this small experience. And obviously the three questions which have been posed: is this the need of our? Well, we are generally recipient-centric people who always are concerned about the recipient. So obviously it is required. How to get it done? Well, that is also possible. Is it possible? Right now, it's a point of contention and a lot of debate. Now, majority of our swabs are ABO incompatible, 1:1 swab, except recently now we have started these chains, 1, 2, 3, and further extending. And we got a little overboard that no, we should also have something where each and everybody should come and register that is online. So then, because of that, we started the website also so that the patients can register. Earlier on, they used to register with us in a routine paper and pen format, and then we used to do further um, whether the ABU compatibility, etc., is there or not there. But now, well, in a very short period, we have around 180 individuals who have registered. And since it is a one center program, so it is easily sortable rather than a multi-centric or a regional or a national level program, which is difficult where a lot of algorithms are required. I'm not going to talk at all about them. I'm going to go to the brass tacks, the basic, the foot soldier, like what it is. The swap at our place has been going on for a pretty long time. Well, just to make it very, very clear, the authorization committee for our center is only meant for unrelated transplants. Those who are not first degree relatives, those who are not husband, wife, they are meant only go to the authorization committee. No other case goes to the authorization committee. So this is over 9 to 10 years, around 200 cases went before the authorization committee. They could be cousins, they could be mother-in-law, it could be anything. And let's see over the years that that unrelated transplants, somewhere around 2013 onwards, we are having majority, a lot of we can say unrelated or a swap or other type of a transplant, 15 to 20 to 25 every year on a routine basis. Unlike some centers where even the spouse was a big no-no, and not to talk about the swap. Now, now let's look at the further breakup. Well, this is the cousins, brother or sister, anything was around 9%, uncle and aunt 17%, in-laws 24%, be it father or a mother or a brother or sister-in-law, anything, different other relations, and a big chunk of this pie was 40% close to was a swap donation. And this is going on from 2013 onwards. Now, if we look at these swabs, so these were 69 swabs, which constituted around close to 40% of these transplants. And over the years, if we look at these swabs, as I said, that except for this peak, this is a combination of 2020 and 21, because 20 and number of transplants were less, while now again it is picking up in that way. But 2013 onwards, the swaps have been going on fairly consistently at our place. As I said, majority were ABO incompatible, and that's how the swapping was done, except now recently only 2 chains of immunologically incompatible as well as a blood group incompatible. These chains were done. Now, I think now let's look at the donor subgroups in these swap transplants. Now, you may call me that I'm too much concerned about other things. As I said, that we are recipient centric. So let's look at the parent son type of a swap, mother wife type of swap, husband wife. It's a 7, and the moment it is wife and wife. That is 2 wives giving to 2 husbands, and the swap, it is 53%. That's the huge chunk which is there amongst the swap transplantations. Now, this slide may not be disturbing, to some, but it may affect some others. Because anybody above the age of 18 years can say yes or no. And still they opted for let's say, wife as a donor, despite 70% had a fully healthy blood-related donor available, be it a brother, sister, father, mother, but despite that, it went for a swab. So we need to think over here by encouraging national swab program, whether we are encouraging this social, societal issue also. Uh, Now I'll come quickly, conclude quickly with a one slide. What are the positives? The positives are obviously that you are providing transplantation to avian compatible and the sensitized recipients. That's the problem which is there always. What were the negatives? Well, I mentioned just now, spousal donors in general are more. We know that the wives in general are more, but with swabs, this number is increasing. Other observation, this I will like, since we are talking about the national program, the reverse exploitation. Now, this was a case which came up as a complaint to the authorization committee. The cases were approved. One was a little better off. The other was not very well off. The person who was not well off, he started taking less of a dialysis. And then he asked that you have to pay for my dialysis. Then only I'll take proper dialysis, because otherwise both are linked. And this is a socioeconomic disparity which will be there in this country. In other words, the type of hospitals which will be participating, or the type of the centers which will be participating, and now this will be there. And the recipient-centric approach, which is there in general, not for the swab, but as such, the donor advocacy just takes a backstage. And I think that is required as a routine, but in swab, it becomes much more important. And this will be the last slide, that we need to take a decision whether we want more transplants to be done, or are we focused toward more matched transplants? That will be the first basic question which needs to be answered. Secondly, what are the standardization? Now, how the GFR is getting measured? There are no standardized criteria which we have, which are applicable all across the country. Similarly, what will happen with the donors with the hypertension, pre-diabetes? Somebody is having microalbuminuria. Some centers accepted, some rejected. So what will happen if we are crossing the boundaries? And then, of course, I said that socioeconomic disparity, that is which group of hospitals will be participating. And it's quite possible that we may end up with like-minded centers as one group. Those groups which have a particular inclination, a particular thought about which donors to be taken, and that's how the centers may get even divided. So I think these are the challenges. I'm not going into the challenges about how much will be the distance, what will be the algorithm, how much will be the scoring system. I'm quite sure the others will be addressing to that. But in our country, I'm quite sure, based on this small, minuscule experience, these are the challenges, and we are a part of the society, and we need to address this. Thank you very much. Back to you, Professor Vijay.
Thank you, Harbir. Take off your slides, and maybe I ask Dr. Vishwanath Billa to share his thoughts.
Thank you so much, Professor Kher. Can you all see my slides?
Yes, yes.
All right. So thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm from Mumbai, and I will speak to you in short about an attempt we made at running a swap program in this city, which is almost 10 years old now. So I am part of an NGO called as the Apex Kidney Foundation, and this swap registry was something that was started as an initiative of the Apex Kidney Foundation. We call it the Apex Swap Transplant Registry, or ASTRA. So essentially, there are about half a dozen nephrologists who are involved with this foundation, and the objective was clearly there was a need, which we all accept. And at that time we said, let's make this attempt to launch this program. And I'm sure all the other nephrologists will buy into this and they will take it to its logical conclusion. So that was the belief, and how it panned out is what I will show to you. So 2011, we created Astra. And from then on, as I said, we are a half dozen nephrologists in this foundation, and we try to involve all the city nephrologists to refer patients to this particular registry, and ensuring that, anybody who registers a patient there, this patient will go back to that nephrologist for the actual transplant. So we started with a few binary swaps, and by 2012, the registry started growing in size. In 2013, we did the first 5-pair simultaneous transplant in the city of Mumbai. The binaries continued. In 2014, we did a 6-pair simultaneous. Very exciting. We collaborated with IIT Bombay. We tried to improve the algorithm, bring in other variables, all with the hope and belief that this kind of program would increase with the participation of all the nephrologists in the city and grow in size. However, from 2016 to 2021, all that we saw was a gradual decline in numbers of swaps that we could do from this registry. And so this is some of the news items that Astra was in 2013 when we did the first domino. So this is a graphical representation of how we did, and clearly this is not the kind of curve that anybody would want to see for a program like this. And this made us introspect. There were a lot of postmortem that we did to what went wrong and why we were not able to successfully propagate this kind of program. And several points come to my mind which I have listed, which I'm sure will be beneficial to the group as they come up with standard guidelines for the nation. Yes. So like in any transplant, there is an induction and there's a maintenance. So while Astra succeeded in the induction way back in 2011, I think we failed when it came to maintaining the curve and allowing the graph to grow. So what was it that caused the failure of the swap transplant program in Mumbai? So the first point is there was no buy-in from most nephrologists in the city. And I don't hold this against them. See, primarily Astra is an NGO with half a dozen nephrologists who are trustees here. And there are 200 nephrologists in the city. There's bound to be a question that is going to be raised in the minds of the other nephrologists is, how do we ensure that this group is not prejudiced? And how do they ensure that these guys will do the transplants themselves and not refer the patients back for transplant by the referring nephrologist? So I think that was the primary reason why this program failed. The second thing we realized is, after the initial enthusiasm and the initial successes, many nephrologists as well as many transplanting hospitals started creating their own mini registries, and they would do their transplants within those registries without referring them to the larger pool that we were trying to develop. The third thing was the protocols at that time for authorizing swaps were in their infancy, and they were very, very complex. And it required a great deal of energy to actually educate and advise and get the authorizing people to kind of align themselves with the interests of the patient and the interests of the nephrologists. Over a period of time, there was a process fatigue that set in. And as nephrologists running a registry, there was only so much we could do. Unlike institutions running registries, whether that is IKDRC or whether that is Dr. Kohli's institution. And so we kind of gave up and we started limiting ourselves to whatever swaps are there within our domain, and we do those as binaries and come out of it. So based on my experience and our experience in the city of Mumbai, or the experience of Astra, there are a few suggestions that we believe could help develop a citywide, a regional, or a national swap transplant program. The first thing is that we should keep it simple. as Dr. Kher said, when we are developing a program that has a potential to grow into a national program, processes that start at ground level have to be very simple. And it is my belief that we should restrict ourselves to blood groups when you find that the pool size is small at the beginning. It's only when the pool sizes grow that you can bring in other variables like HLA matching and age matching and all those things, which completely don't make sense when your pool size is very small. Second thing is that every nephrologist should be considered as a stakeholder in this program. So unless we have a buy-in of each and every nephrologist, a program like this cannot take off. And to achieve that, the nephrologist has to be convinced that if he is giving the registry, he should also receive from the registry. So it has to be a two-directional process. It can't be that there is one nephrologist or one group of nephrologists or one hospital or one group of hospital which become kind of the hotbeds of swab transplant activity, and all these transplants are directed only to those places, and other nephrologists feel that they have nothing to gain by participating in a registry like this. Third is that I feel registries should be like our UPI. They have to have the government backing. They have to be governed by the laws of the land. But at the same time, they have to be nimble, they have to be swift, they have to be innovative, they have to understand the larger objective of society and the patients and the nephrologists, and kind of adjust themselves. Government body that responds, weeks after we put in an application to kind of give us answers to questions that we have in areas like this. Processes that are involved in swab transplants need to be simplified. And I will give you two examples of what at a time when we did these swabs, if there was a three-way swab happening across 3 hospitals, 3 pairs, every hospital insisted that they want to see the 3 donors, the 3 recipients, the 3 witnesses. And we had to actually put all these people in a bus and move them from one hospital to another, to each of those committees, making sure that none of them needed dialysis on those days, making sure none of the patients became breathless in all this traveling. And imagine the kind of nightmare it was when we did the 6-way transplant, the 6-way domino. So I think we could do better on that front. Secondly, there are certain terminologies which at least in 2011 were not defined. For example, the term domino was not defined. And we had one of the 6-paired domino who was from Rajasthan, and the Rajasthan government refused to give permission, saying that the word domino is not mentioned in the act and therefore we cannot give permission. When we tried to convince them that a domino is nothing but a wholesale swap and not a retail swap, they said, you're saying that the act doesn't say this. So all these terminologies need to be very objective, clearly defined, so that there is no ambiguity in the person who is interpreting the act or the law. Another point that we felt very strongly about is, each of our cities have very long deceased donor transplant waitlisted patients. I'm pretty sure that at least 20% of them have a swap donor, and they have not even thought on the lines of leveraging that swap donor into a swap program. I think anybody who registers for a deceased donor program should mandatorily sign in. There should be an opt-in clause where they would want to participate in a swap transplant while registering for the deceased donor transplant. Because if they do, and it makes them aware that there is an option like this, and they explore opportunities with their families, I'm pretty sure that a significant number of patients from this deceased donor transplant waitlist will come into the swap program, and it will help growth of the swap program in this country. So to end, my 2 bits on this is that we should start small, we should build big, and then we can maximize gains by bringing complex algorithms into this kind of program. Thank you so much.
At the very onset, I thank Professor Vijay Kher and the team of Avatar to giving me this opportunity. After following Vishwanath is always a challenge. So I will not give any solution to that. Maybe next time I'll talk beforehand. But anyway, in the next few minutes, I'll discuss about our model, which has been a lot of challenges. We have done minuscule numbers and the issues that we faced in our swap program, and finally a little bit about our solutions. In Hyderabad, only for the last couple of years, in 2018 and 2019, we had 6 binaries, 5 were in-center. 1 was inter-center, and the participating centers included our hospital, Care Hospital, where we had 2 each. 1 from Global Hospital, and the inter-center was between KIMS, Virinchi. These were the 6 binaries we had. And in the very beginning, we had issues about when we identified a pair that who will counsel. As Vishwanath explained, at which center, do we involve everybody, the witnesses, the counselors, the nephrologist? And if it is an inter-center binary, do we do it in a neutral venue? And if so, where do we counsel? Then came the issue of do we share all the clinical data between the donor recipient pairs? And do we do that simply along with them, let the patient's family interpret it? Or do we need the nephrologist guidance in sharing this data and explaining to them if there are significant differences between the DRP's clinical parameters? And where do we do the transplant? For our single centers, it was easy at a single center. Should we do it with a single physician? This is also very important. Like in our center, we have 3 independent nephrologists. And the first binary that we did, we had 2 nephrologists involving with each other. And then you need to be like-minded to be able to handle this kind of exchanges. Then logistics and economics is very important. Who bears the cost of transferring these donors and recipients between centers? What about the pre-transplant investigations? Dr. Kher was saying we should be uniform. Some people do a whole array of immunological tests. Somebody just does the CBC and says things are fine. And then there is a question of unequal costing of the procedure. And hospital stay can differ. One recipient stays for 5 days because the surgeon doesn't put a stent or a drain. The other stays for 10 days and drains take longer to come out. And transplants and different levels of hospital matters, because if it's a high level hospital, the costing will be much, much more than, let's say, we have a swap along with a medical college like IKDRC or PGI. So whatever the challenges we have faced and some of the solutions which we feel may help the stakeholders when they discuss and decide a swap program, that whenever we identify the binary, the counseling should be done by a whole team of doctors, maybe at a single place and not ferry them from one center to another. And they should take care of all aspects of the DRP. We should share the clinical data. It should be a non-anonymous donation. We should try our best to have as closely matched DRPs as possible. Uniform evaluation and post-transplant care. This, I agree, is a limitation because you have very little pairs, and to find a uniform match becomes difficult. So these are situations where we should look for inter-center and regional binaries, because you need a critical mass of donors and recipients to have a better program and develop registries and algorithms in the future. In inter-center, the surgeries may be left dependent to any center according to their choice. Believe that initially we should start with donor transfers. There are data to say that organ transfer is as good as a donor transfer, but we don't have data of our country about the doubts of ischemia time and organ viability. Transferring an organ in our city may take anywhere between 1.5 hours to 2 hours sometimes. The economic challenges, of course, the costing, the surgical and the pre-transplant investigation. It is preferable to perform surgeries in like-minded and the similar level of hospitals, because the costing then can become uniform. And all overheads should be alerted to the managements of both these hospitals, whether inter-center or in-center, to address the issue of equalizing the cost of both these DRPs, irrespective of how many days they stayed and whatever the post-operative complication. It is very important. We realized non-uniform costing creates a lot of heartburn in between the pairs. In our city, there are legal challenges because pair kidney exchange is still considered as an unrelated transplant. Our state has not ratified the act, so it requires DME permission. We had trouble for a regional swap. It took us almost a year for getting that transplant done, because the DRP came from 2 different states, one from West Bengal and one from Chhattisgarh. We request all of us, all of you who are present today, to lean on our government to ratify the act in our states, and I believe even Andhra Pradesh has not been ratified. Need help of societies, NOTO or SOTO, and even NGOs who are in working in transplantation sphere can help us overcome this challenge. We also believe that there should be some protection to the clinical team in an unfortunate circumstances of an unequal outcome. We had one, but we did not get into trouble. So when we develop, the stakeholders who develop all these guidelines should also look into it, that there is some protection. Similarly, a protection to the recipient in case of a donor reneging. We can look for legal protection. We can look into a system by which this recipient gets a donor early, or we mix and match or marry with our DDTX wait list, which I think is a good idea as told by Vishwanath. We have a very strong disease donor program, and we need to link this with our paired kidney exchange program in our city. I do believe that we have a lot of challenges. We have started small. We have a lot of nephrologists who are keen to be part of it. And I believe with this beginning, Hyderabad will hopefully contribute in the future effectively and in a better manner in the future. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Urmila.
Onset, I will like to express initiation of National Kidney Exchange Program by Avatar Foundation, and I also acknowledge the great contribution by Professor Rees by providing us APD software and other knowledge exchange to expand our program. This is the year-wise numbers of paired kidney exchange at our single center. The upper panel is showing numbers and lower panel is showing percentage of living donor kidney transplant. From 2000 to 2011, we performed only 56 KPD transplant. At this time, during the first 10 years, transplant coordinator used to maintain the KPD registry. I started with the swab transplant registry at our center in 2011. Thereafter, there is a substantial growth and progress in number of swab transplant at our single center. In 2013, 14, and 15, we have performed 56, 56, and 75 swab transplant. This constitutes 16, 18, and 25% of swab at our single center. Thereafter, every year we perform around 20% of living donor kidney transplant from the kidney exchange. In 20 and 21, the number came down to 50% because since we are the government transplant center, COVID was a priority for us, and we had a dedicated COVID facility for most of the time during first and second wave. The reason for joining the kidney exchange. From 2000 to 2011, when transplant coordinator used to maintain this registry, the reason for joining kidney exchange was only ABO incompatible. Then we increased participation for the sensitized pair and also in participation of compatible pair to increase the swab. We used to provide them haplo match in the HLA or young donor age in case of compatible pair. Most important thing is that the chain length in swab should increase slowly from 2-way in 2000, 3-way in 2013, 4-way in 2016, 5-way in 2018, 6-way in 2019, and 10-way in 2020. So over the last 20 decades, the chain length increases gradually. We understand our own how to overcome the logistics when chain length increases. So 75% transplant in our center are from 2-way exchange and 25% transplant are from 3-way or longer chain. The longer chain is performed only when it increases transplant for difficult to match patients like sensitized patients or O group patients. Then in January 2020, we performed the 10-way kidney exchange of 10 patients and 10 donors over a period of 3 weeks, because in single center it is not possible to perform the simultaneous surgery and a patient and graft survival is 100% and 0% donor lineage. 50% of pairs at our center are from other states and 50% are from state of Gujarat. 2018 onwards, as per Transplant Human Organ Act 2014, we didn't take permission from other states, but we take permission from state level authorization committee. So if the 14th amendment is accepted by the state, there is no need to take permission from other states when pairs are from different state. The transplant hospital or state level authorization committee can give the permission for such swab. There is no issue that wife will be have some pressure for the kidney donation in swab. The gender disparity is uniform in India for living related compatible transplant, for paired kidney exchange or deceased donor transplant. So there is no concern that wife will be have pressure for donating the kidney. In any way, mother and wife are most common donors for compatible transplant or any incompatible pair who join the kidney exchange. So gender disparity is common in all the types of transplant in developing world, as per our recent publications coming in the coming issue of transplantation. Uh, in single center, there is limitations to perform the simultaneous surgery. So we perform 17 non-simultaneous kidney exchange cycles in 67 pairs. So 67 pairs were operated on different days with 0% donor lineage, and 19 bridge donors were trusted to donate their kidney, and wait time is just 2 or 3 days. So we always perform surgery on the consecutive days when chain length increases to more than 2. So we use a different type of combinations like KPD with desensitization, compatible pair. Then we also use a long chain like three-way exchange to increase awareness about the swab transplant. We performed 10-way swab on World Kidney Day 2013. Then to increase transplant for difficult to match patients, we perform longer chain. We also perform international swab, then 5-way swab and 6-way swab, and 10-way swab in 2020. So there is no concern about donor recipient age difference in case of swab when donor pool is less, and outcome of swab is similar to any compatible transplant with the use of thymoglobulin induction, but of course this is a short-term analysis. To conclude, I will say that we should start with the successful single center program, then successful multi-center city-based program, and then we should expand the program to state, regional, and national program. And KPD option should be counseled to each incompatible pair, because many incompatible pair are not aware about the KPD as a cost-effective way. So we should gradually expand the pool from single center to national program. Thank you.
Thank you, if he's here. Sandeep, is he here?
Yes, yes. I can see you, sir. Thank
you. Yeah,
you.
Sandeep, yes. Well, any comments or your experience about it?
You know,
short time.
We've been doing swaps for some time, and the Apollo group got interested in swaps. That's when we involved Dr. Agnihotri and Dr. Rees to see if we could do a group swap, which means if the Apollo group could do a swap, and we're still working on the logistics. But our biggest problem to get a swap together is the same reason that Urmila said. You have independent physicians looking after independent patients, and to get them on board to share their patients becomes extremely difficult, number one. Number two, with the ABO incompatible programs and people getting so much more experience, as Vivek said, 75% of his transplants were ABO incompatible. And I do agree the cost is more. The results definitely are a bit inferior. But with the ABO incompatible transplants and people getting so much experience, more and more people I feel are turning towards the ABO incompatible as an option to get over this, just people finding it very difficult to work together.
Thank you, Sandeep, for that. And may I now go to Michael Rees? It's all yours.
Thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Wonderful. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much, Dr. Kerr, for inviting me. and also for inviting Atul to be a part of this. It's a pleasure to see all of you again. I look forward to being able to do that in person. I've enjoyed being a part of your WhatsApp group and seeing the conversation that's taken place. And what I'm going to try to do today is to speak to some of the big topics that I saw you talking about, and frankly, that I heard presented by Dr. Kohli, Billa, and Anand. So first thing is, Bill Clinton used to have in his office a sign that said, "Keep it simple, stupid." And I think that that's a great way for us to think about starting kidney exchange. I think that first you have to prove that you can do it in a single center. And certainly Apollo, Medant, Max, and Gungaram in Delhi are big enough to be able to do single center exchanges. But what can happen when you get good at doing it on your own is that you can then come together, and with a larger and more diverse pool, you could do it across the city. Doing it within the state, as I've learned in India, is important because of the authorization committees, which vary from state to state. And the only one that I know that's able to go across states is Vivek, who has a very good working relationship with his SOTO, so that they allow his state's authorization committee to authorize pairs that come in from other states. So I think it's really important that as we think about doing regional matching, we begin to work with NODO and make it so that this issue of authorization becomes simplified. Because we heard from Dr. Kohli, Billa, and Anand that the authorization committee is one of the really big stumbling blocks to making this work. Once we can do it across states or at a regional level, for example, let's think about the Apollo system. They are in many states, and so even within one system, if they worked regionally or through a hospital system with consistent protocols and whatnot, they'd still be working across state borders and different authorization committees. So I think that before we think about trying to do something across state borders at the regional level, this really needs to be managed politically to make this authorization process simpler. Then national, and then of course international, and you're going to be hearing a little later from Atul about the work that we've been doing at the international level. But let's keep it simple for now. Let's have many centers begin doing it as single centers, and then try to combine them. If we want to combine them, then we need to think about the platform that's sharing the data. And so a really important part of trying to think about how to do things even within a city will be having a single platform, or if you're going to have multiple platforms, there has to be a very easy transfer of data between those platforms, so that it's very simple and it doesn't become frustrating to the participating programs. There's a lot of talk about whether the donors should travel or whether the kidney could be transported. That issue, over 20 years of experience now in the United States, is resolved. We never make the donors travel anymore because the focus really has to be on the patients, and the patients don't want to travel, the donors don't want to travel, they want to stay in their home. So even for compatible transplants now in the United States, we will take a kidney out where the donor lives and ship it because we know that we can ship kidneys with 15 hours of cold time, and there's been no demonstrated difference. But again, let's go back to keep it simple. It's really simple to have the donors travel and to do what we're used to doing, having a donor and a recipient in the same hospital. And so maybe that's an easy way for us to begin it, is to have the donors travel. That's how we did it in the United States. But I think ultimately it will end with shipping the kidneys. If we're going to work across transplant centers, then we need to have a common agreed protocol for how the standard operating procedure for how we're going to work up a donor. There needs to be consistency across the participating centers because you really want to try to avoid an unequal outcome. Speaking of that, you need to have trust. So the donor surgeon has to be trusted by the recipient surgeon that they're going to give them a high quality kidney that hasn't been damaged, that hasn't made the likelihood of success less. And so building trust between transplant centers has been something that over the past 20 years we've realized is a really important part of doing this. I think sort of the elephant in the room really is the economics of kidney exchange, given how ABO incompatible transplantation operates. We heard this from Dr. Billa and from Dr. Galeria. When kidney exchange happens, and you can avoid doing desensitization, there's a lot of cost that's avoided. But with avoided costs, there's also bigger transfer of funds, and we have to make this so that it's in the best interest of everybody. And we can do that because dialysis is so much more expensive than transplantation, that we can make this a win-win for everybody. And so I think if you're going to build a successful kidney exchange program, it economically has to compete with ABO incompatible transplantation. Not only, we all know that it's cheaper, but we can't let the fact that it's cheaper then also impact the economics of the referring physicians. So we need to, as my colleague Alvin Roth would say, you need good market design in order to build a system that really gives everybody what they're looking for. Doctors are very busy. Adding the extra time and energy that it takes to do the consultation for kidney exchange is something we need to be careful about. But it does require good counseling of the patients and the donors for them to participate. KPD requires a physician and a coordinator champion in order to be successful at a transplant center. That's been very clear. And finally, I think the future, and again, let's keep it simple, but I think the future is that what we're all looking for is a good long-term outcome. And what we're finding now in the United States is that patients that participate in kidney exchange have better long-term results than patients who participate in straightforward living compatible transplantation. And that's because we're improving the quality of the match, I believe. So kidney exchange, I think, will become more and more common in that we'll use it not only to help incompatible pairs, but will help compatible pairs get a better quality match. And we'll make this better for the patients. Ultimately, that's really our job. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Atul.
Honorable panel, organizers, and people that may be participating in this forum. Some really, really good perspectives shared by everyone. And Mike, I appreciate you sharing the US experience. As some of you know, I am philanthropically engaged with Mike and APKD to help bring these best practices to India and neighboring regions. And as part of that, we've just recently actually been working on developing a national program for UAE. And as part of developing that program, we've actually facilitated an agreement between UAE and the state of Israel. And that led to a three-way transplant between the national programs of the two countries. So some of what I'll share with you is sort of learnings from UAE. And I'll actually start off with where Mike left, which is that, the importance of having good transplant coordinators and an education program. In UAE, I think one of our biggest learning experiences is having quality coordinators that can actually have a good conversation with the payers, explain to them the merits of the program, allay their fears, and help them understand the value of participation has really, really actually benefited them. And then having, specific people focused on as centralized match resources has been very helpful in building their program. In UAE, I think it's fairly important for them to share the data in a secure way, and given the data has been shared between different transplant centers, sharing the data in a de-identified manner, and identifying the pairs only when the matches are approved. So till the time the physicians are talking about the pairs. They don't know who that individual is. Their identifying data is protected. And once they say they're interested in a particular pair and they approve that matching, at that time we identify the pair to them. In UAE, we also wanted to make sure that all the physicians have access to the medical information as well as medical charts, and that we are able to ensure that everyone actually is able to see the information in a fairly updated, consistent manner. So that was a big challenge in UAE that we have enabled. We want in UAE, I think, and just like in India, I would say that all Emirates in UAE, we wanted to make sure that they all have the same regulatory process. There are no gaps in coverage between different insurance companies, and that a fund is set aside to offset any donor cost and gaps are bridged. So this helps sort of ensure where somebody's insurance is not covering a small part of their processing, and that can be somehow managed by a central fund. I think there's a need for each center to feel that they are fairly treated. Mike has shared with me that I think, and he briefly touched upon that in his presentation, that in the past 20 years, we have never had a recipient go to another center without other centers, the listing center's encouragement, because maybe the listing center felt like they weren't a good candidate for their center, or there were services that they needed that the listing center wasn't able to provide. Otherwise, the patient has always kept at the listing center. Each hospital, I think the big part of KPD program, when you're talking about multiple centers, is the quality of the pool and actually being able to make a difference through that pool. And what happens is if the centers are holding back on their pairs and not putting it in a timely manner, or giving only the hardest to match, then the outcomes won't be as attractive. So some sort of a consideration should be given to an alignment between centers about how they share the pair, how long should they hold the pairs back, and the quality of the pairs that they're inputting into the program. The other, I think, issues are around logistics, meaning I think I like where the conversation is going, start with the center, then go to a city, and then go national, because that does help with the logistical side of it. From a logistics perspective, you want to make sure that the kidney is transported in a certain way and it's not damaged or the graft is not lost. The bigger the region that you're dealing with, and based on the maturity of the logistical system, that may or may not be as reliable. And I think that should be given some consideration. And planning of the surgery date is another important thing, especially when you're doing long chains, because what time should nephrectomy start at a certain center? What's the next sequence to that? What's the next sequence to that? When would the graft be transported? And keeping secure communication channels open between these centers, so that if there's any delays or any last minute hiccups, that they are discussed and remediated. So I think that's my share of experience in UAE. Again, I think in terms of endorsement of the approach, I would like to say that starting with the center, going to the city, and then thinking about national may be the right approach.
Thank you, Michael and Atul, for your words of wisdom, and I think they mean a lot. I think as far as for us for going forward, and I think you have really summarized actually the direction in which we should be going. And I think most of you said that keep it simple, go from city and then keep on building on that kind of an experience. And this is what even Vivek had shown, that he grew from binary to a three-way and then progressively went up. And I think that's the way to go, I guess. And I think I leave it now for a group discussion. If there are any questions each one of you have, which you would want to ask the other person, and it would be good to sort of discuss it, some nitty-gritties here and there. And I think it's becoming clear that actually I have one question which probably Vivek might be able to answer, and that's that even if you start a city program itself, between different centers, would you think that we should involve SOTO directly into this? We should also have a meeting with NOTO to look at some of these nitty-gritties itself. But I think many centers may have, in each city, might have to sit with their own SOTOs to sort of discuss the various issues if you want to do this. How do you go about it, since you've been dealing with NOTO and SOTO much more frequently?
So they are mainly functioning for the disease donation. So basically involving them is a good option, but probably it will increase the time. So it is a decision between the transplant centers. They can just form a group, send application to the state level committee, and the permission will be given by state level committee. So SOTO doesn't come anyway in this process.
Yeah, but in a city like Delhi, see Apollo, and which Mike was saying that Apollo does binary transplants, swap transplants. Gangaram does it. Medanta has been doing it, and many other hospitals. Max has been doing it. So all of us could combine and sort of see. But which committee will now determine this? Delhi has an external committee as well, but each hospital has a committee of their own. So we go to the state committee straight for this kind of a combination, or what would happen?
First, the permission will be given by the hospital committee. And then, for example, if 5 pairs are operated in 5 different hospitals, then the final permission will be given by state committee.
So Dr. Kher, what happens is that you actually, wherever the pair is going to get operated is where you get the permission from. And then you finally take a joint permission. It's quite a tedious process. And we've looked at it in detail. So if I was to get a kidney from Medanta, that donor would have to come here and my donor would have to go to you.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to see, that we will have to sort of sort this out to some extent. That's why I was thinking that involving SOTO and NOTO might, whether interpretation of the law basically. See, if we are doing good, it's same everywhere else also.
So
I agree that there are legal.
Yeah,
legally it's very constraining.
Delhi doesn't have a SOTO, so NOTO will have to play a role.
Yeah.
They're still not very clear. We've been working on them for this, but they haven't come back to us with a clear mandate as to what we should do.
Vivek, you have any answers to the problem in Delhi itself? So what do you suggest?
Sir, when the permission is given by hospital-based committee or state level committee? Even in the hospital-based committee, there are members nominated by the state.
Yeah.
So SOTO or NOTO, they are basically a government, but anyway, government nominated members are there in the hospital-based committee. So I think that should be okay. Otherwise, this will just increase the time.
Vivek, your advantage is that your SOTO is at IKDRC, so it's very easy if your hospital is the SOTO as well. It's also very easy to do swaps and, multiple swaps beyond binaries in the government sector.
Yeah.
In the private sector, it becomes very complex. I'm telling you, at the All India Institute, it would be very, very easy to do a three-way exchange. But in the private sector, there are just too many things involved. And it becomes, the authorization committee is very, very, very scared of getting involved in it.
So the way out is to...
There are 4 private hospitals in Delhi, 1 pair in each hospital. So it is very easy to operate 1 pair in single day rather than 4 pair in 1 day. So that will just, the multi-center simultaneous swap will give solution to all the 4 hospitals.
Yeah, I know that can happen. Urmila, what do you...
I think instead of involving any of these governmental or quasi-governmental organizations, we form our guidelines. We make it a little informal. So we have noticed this issue with deceased donor transplant. Each state has its own website, and now it is becoming very difficult to interface our website with the NOTO and SOTO websites. So instead of doing that, we should make all the cities or the states, you take a lead, ask who want to be part of it, develop a similar website. I had gone to Vishwanath Billa to ask for his algorithms and websites about 4 years back. make a simple website, make our own guidelines, then discuss this with the government and get a permission. Rather than asking them to do something, as Vivek says, it will be very delayed. Sir.
Yeah,
We
but the
form
government,
guidelines.
yes, I agree that we will have to sort this out probably with the government in some
Yeah.
format.
And when we make a rule that if it's a swap exchange,
Yes.
then it has a different way of getting permissions.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I was looking for.
It should be a different pathway for doing this transplants.
Yeah, we
The
have to
approvals
simplify
and all
it.
those things.
Yes, we
Yes,
have
sir.
to simplify it. We can't make it so complex, and
Yes, sir.
then it's not going to happen.
It
If
will
we,
never
unless
happen that
and
way, sir.
avoid the way Mike said it, actually keep it simple. And that has to be a fundamental kind of a rule, because then only it will grow. Otherwise, if you're making it more complex, doctors remain busy. And as happened with Dr. Billa, you could see that during the initial enthusiasm, it went well. But as the enthusiasm fell down, then there were problems. And I think that's important. And keeping it simple is I think the bottom line for this, in my opinion.
So you make it simple, sir. You develop
Yes.
the guidelines. You look into the areas.
Yeah, we
Then
can.
we
We will.
discuss with the
Yes.
government, sir. That's
Yes,
it.
yes, we will.
Urmila, it's not about the guidelines. You know, the ISOT published these guidelines almost 5 years ago.
I know, sir.
Just getting to, just getting the requisite permissions is so difficult. I'm telling you, we've come up with
Unfortunately, the guidelines I've gone through actually did not involve many of the stakeholders. And
Yeah,
secondly, what we need to do is when we have these guidelines, we talk to the government. And as you said, the most important part for corporate or a private hospital is getting those permissions. For Vivek, it is very easy. For me to get for my own binary, it took me 1 year.
Yeah. It
To-
is.
That's all.
Vishwanath, you want to make a comment or something?
So I think the world within the four walls of a public sector hospital or a public sector institution is very different from the world outside of those walls.
That's true.
Inside those walls, you have full authority, full control, and the patients are at your feet for you to do what you want to do with them. The outside world is very different. Each one is gunning for you. To execute anything like this, we need to have very strong protective laws and procedures to safeguard the interests of the nephrologists outside these walls doing something like this. It's very easy if for example, instead of donors moving, if the kidneys move, and if the kidney which goes from South Bombay to North Bombay reaches in time, and the North Bombay to South Bombay reaches 2 hours late, and if that person has the delayed graft function, daggers would be drawn. So I think all of us are aware of this who work in the private sector, and therefore laws that seem to soften or ease in the processes within four walls are not equivalent to the laws that should be there outside of these four walls.
Yeah, I know all of us will have challenges which are not easy to sort of really find good solutions about. Harbir, I don't. Where is Harbir? Yeah.
Yes,
Harbir.
I just wanted to make the same point. Within the walls, let's talk about within the walls. If you have more and more blocks like this who are doing, let's say, 1:1 swab, like 100 centers doing, whether it's which Dr. Billa initially suggested, ABU incompatible, then immunological, that's how you go, don't go for the domino, etc., etc. Your voices are heard a little in a stronger manner. But now comes the big question. Dr. Billa said that the world outside is different. I want to say, so 4 hospitals in the Delhi, why can't you sort out your world within the 4 walls? Now that's the big problem. It's not a problem outside, Dr. Billa. Just a second, hold on. Because Dr. Guleria very nicely mentioned, patient doesn't belong to a disease. Patient belongs to a consultant. Now that's the one where the block comes. Actually, I understand fully that it's a big protective umbrella in a public sector hospital. It's a very, very easy to go. And for example, different authorization committees, which you were talking of just now, 4 hospitals. Here, all we have to go is if there is a problem, approach a high court judge and we'll get some written from him. Okay, you can go ahead with this. That's it. So that safeguards you. It's very easy for us. I'm telling you, it's very easy. But then now in such a difficult scenario, how to sort out your own complex. That's it. Whether it's Dr.
I agree with you, Harbir, but the question is that we need to find solutions for this. This is a need for our patients. I think, as Michael said, that ultimately in United States and rest of the world, swap programs might become bigger and bigger because you are having good outcomes in these patients, because you're increasing the matching of these patients also to some extent. I'm not saying that we're going there as yet, but what I'm saying is that ultimately the world is moving in that direction. So I feel that at least to start with, we should remove the blocks that are existing within us. So give solutions rather than problems. I understand there are problems. There is no doubt about it that there are huge problems. It could be thought of that they are in the private sector, in the government sector. Ultimately, we are talking of good of the patient. If we can provide them better graft survival and provide them good outcomes of those grafts at a lesser cost. Every one of these patients are paying from their own pockets. By and large, still large majority of Indians pay for their transplants. So therefore, it's very important to keep these costs down. ABO compatible is solution, but the costs are twice that of an ABO compatible transplant. So I think it's very important for us to think in these terms and try to see where we can find solutions to some of these problems. And I feel that in cities, we need to work harder. We need to spend some more time. We need to provide uniform and have initially at least like-minded centers, as you also said in your presentation, Harbir, and many others also said that initially probably maybe start with like-minded people. Michael had already sensed some of these like-minded centers even from United States, although he has visited us many times, and he said that Gangaram, Max, Apollo, and Medanta, there's no reason why we should not come together and find solutions. Dr. Sandeep Guleria is right that yes, there are problems, but I think we need to find solutions to these problems. And unless we try to look for those solutions, we will never find them. We will never find them.
For example, if we have a swap donation outside the purview of the Act, then everything will be sorted out.
Yeah.
Dr. Kohli, it will take you a decade to get the law modified.
That's why I was looking at you. That's why
I was involved in the last modification.
So
it took us a decade.
Convert a decade to a year.
I know how long it takes to get the law modified. It's very, very
No, I don't think we will have to work around the law. I don't think we will be looking at changing the law, but we may have to work around the law in some way or the other. And I think that's possible. That's possible. I would think that that's what would be possible. Vivek, you have any suggestions for, say, Delhi or Mumbai or Hyderabad? Because these are big cities. Most centers are private centers and corporate. So what suggestion do you have, Vivek?
So, sir, for the multi-center city-based program, we need 1 or 2 dedicated transplant coordinator who will tackle the common problems of the patient and donor. Okay. And in terms with the existing law also, all related donors are allowed. So maybe with better coordination, I don't anticipate any problem for getting permission from the state authorization committee.
Yeah, I would like to keep that positive. I know there are a lot of negative thoughts about our problems. I understand that, but I think we will have to work around if we want to move ahead in this direction. We will have to work around some of these problems, come out with solutions. And let me, before I come to summarize, I will ask Michael and maybe Atul to, you have seen the discussion. So what is your advice?
Well, I've been trying to help in India for close to a decade now.
Yes, I know that.
and Dr. Guleria gave me a great insight today. Thank you. I kind of knew this, but I didn't put all the pieces together. You know, in Washington, D.C., it's not a state. It's a special thing with its own government, which is sort of ruled by the United States government. And it seems to me that what I heard you say was that in Delhi, it's ruled by the federal government, not by. So I don't know the nuance, but they can do things in Washington, D.C. that don't apply to the whole country. And I'm beginning to think that maybe what you should do is to get a group of transplant centers, maybe the four we've mentioned today, Max and Medanta and Palo and Gangaram. I'm not very good at pronouncing that. Gangaram.
You're doing very well, Michael.
I'm working on it. And if you got those four hospitals sort of agree how you would do it, I'll tell you how it works in the United States, and here would be my suggestion. We also kind of have an authorization committee, but not really. But we have an authorization committee. It's the same committee that allows somebody to go on and receive a deceased donor kidney. And the same committee also agrees that a donor and a recipient are related and can donate to each other. So you think of those in the United States as each hospital's authorization committee. Could you get a variance, let me call it that, a variance that in Delhi, if the local authorization committee approves the pair, they can be put into the KPD, and then whoever they get matched with does not require an additional authorization. And it would be a very simple 2 or 3 line exemption variance. And if it worked in Delhi, then it may facilitate trying to do something at a national level, and it'd be a nice way for an experiment, in a sense, to be done as we could do an experiment in Washington, D.C., and then if it worked, try to expand it at a larger level. Is that possible?
I would think, see, if you ask Dr. Guleria, I know there are difficulties in doing this, but I will think that it should be possible to do it. And I thank you for giving this kind of a suggestion and I feel that in Delhi, we should be able to do it. And then maybe what you're suggesting that maybe expand it to other programs. I think Dr. Guleria's positive attitude and help would definitely help, because he has good connections with the government as well. So I know that his involvement would definitely be of great help. Sandeep, I have your yes in that.
No problem, sir. At your service. Whatever you say, not a problem at all.
Okay, so I don't think we are going to make more to come out of this discussion. We know where we need to go, and I must thank all of you for giving your expertise solutions, as well as a lot of challenges that we have in conducting a swap program, maybe in center, in the city itself, and then trying to make it regional and other things. But if we are going to be able to start, I think we should do it at a city level. And you can see that there have been difficulties even in the city level itself also. But I do hope with the suggestions from across the Atlantic, as well as from every one of you, we should keep it simple. I think, Ajay, you have some concluding slides or not been able to make, but I think the concluding slides were predominantly done by Michael. I think Michael had everything that I wanted that we should have, is predominantly that we should do it, keep it simple. I think that's the buzz that should be, that it should remain simple. Start with a single center, city, regional, and national. Include slowly over a period of time. I think ABO incompatibles and HLA incompatibles, you could include both, but maybe as the pairs, as the numbers go increasing, then I'm sure the HLA incompatibles will add to this, and then we can make it even bigger. So keep it simple. Impact of blood group compatible alternative donors due to swap and socio-economic disparities need to be obviously sorted out. I'm sure that as we gain experience, we should be able to sort out some of this. It's not difficult, especially amongst, say, we are talking of 4 centers here. I know Vishwanath might be saying that I'm sure they will be able to sort this out. Similarly, in Mumbai as well. Mumbai is almost a replica of the NCR Delhi. We should buy in every nephrologist. And I think that's, Billa made a very, very important point that in his program, it's didn't buy in, therefore the program may have failed, and therefore get the surgeons and the nephrologists together into this program. And all the other stakeholders, the administrators, the hospital administrators, they need to be, and the data should be easy, standardized, and should be on a software. So we should have a common outcome data sort of entry as well as analysis. We should be similar between or amongst these centers. Process fatigue, complex protocol of authorizations, streamlining of the system, these need to be obviously sorted out, and that's what the whole discussion was about. And I feel, and Mike said it again, that doctors remain busy. We remain, especially nephrologists in bigger cities are very, very busy because the patient loads are very heavy per nephrologist, and therefore it has to be extremely simple. And I think we will have to involve some common coordinators, transplant coordinators, to do this kind of thing, and we'll have to work it out with the, probably with the government, how we do it. Obviously, multiple authorizations we talked about, and the variants and exceptions of the protocols, and trying to uniformly make them simpler. And that's going to be probably the most important thing that we need to do, is to simplify the process, keep everything simple. If that is what we are going to be able to successfully do it, then I think it's something which can be done. And ultimately, yes, disease donor registration, we should have a swap program in amongst those kind of people. And I think that's going to be, and as Vishwanath said, that about 20% to 30% of people may have possible swaps in a disease donor waiting model itself, and we might be able to provide easy and early transplantation to many of these patients. So with this, I must thank all of you for a wonderful discussion, and I must again thank Ajay and Sanjeev Jasuja and the Avatar Foundation for giving us this opportunity. And I would like to end by saying that in Delhi, I take the responsibility of continuing to work towards trying to see what Michael had suggested, and let me see, with the involvement of the surgeons and the transplant physicians, nephrologists, as well as some of the administrators, at least in these 4 to 5 hospitals, we should be able to probably have an initiative. And I give myself and the Delhi nephrologists and surgeons, some of them are here, at least 1 year that we should be able to have this program. I do hope that the pandemic itself is going to be on the dwindling side, and we should be in 2022. We should be hopefully out of this, and let's hope that we are able to start this program. With this, thank you very much, all of you, for coming forward, and goodbye.
Thank you so much.